She thought she was just feeding a stranger, but the man sitting at her table held a secret that would change her life forever. It was a cold and cloudy Tuesday morning in the middle of November, and Emily Carter was already tired even before her shift started. She worked as a waitress in a small, cozy diner in the heart of Philadelphia. The diner was the kind of place where the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air from the moment the doors opened. Most of the customers were regulars: truck drivers, retired couples, people who worked in nearby offices. Many came in every day. Emily knew most of them by name. She smiled at them, refilled their coffee, listened to their little stories, and remembered how they liked their eggs, or if they took sugar in their tea. She wasn't rich, but she liked her job, even if it was tiring. That morning, the diner was especially busy. The rain had started to fall lightly outside, and people rushed in to warm themselves up. Emily moved quickly between tables, balancing plates, pouring coffee, and writing down orders on her notepad. Her manager, a kind but strict woman named Carla, stood behind the counter, making sure everything ran smoothly. Emily was wiping down a table near the front window when she saw someone strange standing outside. He was standing in the rain, wearing a long brown coat that was soaked through. His hair was messy and tangled, and his beard looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. His shoes were worn out and covered in mud. He had a bag slung over one shoulder, the kind homeless people often carried with everything they owned inside. His eyes scanned the diner, watching the people inside as if he was unsure whether he should come in or not. Emily paused for a second and watched him. Something about him made her stop. He looked exhausted, not just tired from walking in the rain, but deeply, hopelessly exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept in a real bed in years. Some customers noticed him too and frowned. One older man muttered something under his breath and shook his head. Emily had seen this before. Homeless people sometimes came by, and most diners turned them away. No one wanted them inside. People felt uncomfortable, but Emily didn't feel uncomfortable. She felt something else, something closer to sadness, or even curiosity. The man opened the door slowly and walked inside. The bell above the door jingled softly, and the warm smell of food wrapped around him like a blanket. Entrance, not knowing where to go. Carla looked up from behind the counter and gave Emily a quick glance. It was the kind of look that said, "Handle this quietly." Emily nodded and walked up to him. "Hi," she said gently, trying not to scare him. "Are you looking for a place to sit?" The man nodded slowly, his eyes scanning her face. There was something about his eyes that struck her something strange. Emily couldn't explain it, but for a split second it felt like she knew those eyes. She shook the thought away. Maybe she was just imagining things. "Come with me," she said softly. "You can sit over here." She led him to a booth near the back, where he would be a little out of sight from the other customers. He followed her without saying a word. When he sat down, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the world had finally let him rest for a moment. Emily brought him a glass of water and a menu, but she could see he wasn't going to order. He opened the menu, stared at it for a while, then closed it and placed it on the table. "Don't have money, do you?" Emily asked quietly, almost whispering. He looked down, ashamed, and shook his head. Emily didn't say anything for a moment. She looked at him. There was something in the way he sat, something in the way his fingers trembled just a little. She couldn't explain it, but the feeling that she knew him began to creep back into her mind. "It's okay," she said. "I'll get you something warm to eat on the house." The man looked up sharply, surprised. His eyes met hers again, and this time the feeling hit her harder. His eyes were a deep shade of blue-gray, almost stormy. She had seen those eyes before, but where? Her heart skipped a beat. But she forced a smile and turned away quickly before he could see the confusion on her face. "In the kitchen?" Emily asked. The cook to prepare a basic breakfast, toast, bacon, and a hot cup of coffee. She paid for it herself. Carla noticed but didn't say anything. This wasn't the first time Emily had paid for someone's meal. It probably wouldn't be the last. When she brought the food to the man, he looked at the plate as if he hadn't seen real food in weeks. "Thank you," he said softly. his voice raspy and dry. Emily froze. That voice? Something about it made her legs feel weak. She tried to act normal. "You're welcome," she replied. But her voice was a little shaky. As the man ate, she watched him from a distance. She tried to focus on other customers, but her eyes kept drifting back to him. Every time he lifted his fork or sipped the coffee, a new wave of emotion washed over her. His mannerisms, the way he rubbed his hands together, even the way he sat, slightly hunched over, she had seen all of that before, but years ago. Memories she hadn't thought about in a long time were starting to surface. She went back to his table, a few minutes later, with a coffee refill. He thanked her again, and she asked him gently, "Do you have a name?" He looked up slowly. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel Carter." The world around her seemed to stop. Emily's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She stared at him, unable to speak. She had heard that name before. Of course she had. It was her last name too, and Daniel. That was her father's name. Her father who had disappeared when she was 4 years old. Her father who had never come back, who her mother said had left them. Her father who she thought was dead or gone. Forever? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She took a step back and nearly stumbled. The coffee pot in her hand trembled, and she quickly placed it on the table before she dropped it. Daniel looked at her strangely now, confused by her sudden change. Emily rushed to the kitchen. Her breath short, her head spinning, she leaned against the counter, trying to understand what just happened. Could it really be him, after all these years? But how? Why now? Carla came over and asked if she was okay. Emily nodded weakly and said she just needed a minute. She peeked through the kitchen door again. Daniel was still sitting at the table, calmly eating his breakfast, completely unaware of the storm he had just brought into her heart. She pulled out her phone and went to her photo gallery. Deep down, she knew she had a picture of her father, Anne. Old one, worn, and faded. Her mother had kept one photo in a box in the attic, and a few years ago, Emily had taken a photo of it on her phone. She scrolled through her gallery until she found it. The man in the picture was younger, clean-shaven, wearing an army uniform, smiling proudly. But the eyes, those same stormy blue-gray eyes, were exactly the same. It was him. She walked back to the table slowly, carefully. When she sat across from him, he looked up again, confused, but calm. "You said your name is Daniel Carter," she asked, her voice tight. He nodded. "Do you have any family?" she asked carefully. Daniel sighed. "I used to," he said. "Daughter Emily. Haven't seen her since she was 4. She probably hates me. Don't blame her." Tears welled up in her eyes. She could barely breathe. "I'm Emily," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm your daughter." Daniel stared at her, frozen, as if the world had vanished. His fork slipped from his hand and clattered onto the plate. His lips moved, but no sound came out. For a moment they both just sat there, two broken people, staring at each other in shock, as if time had opened a door neither of them expected. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside that little diner, something far more powerful had begun to unfold, connection long lost, but not forgotten. In one moment, the past had found its way back into the present, and nothing would ever be the same again. Emily sat across from the man who had just told her his name, Daniel Carter. Her heartbeat felt too loud, like it was echoing inside her head. Her hands were cold, but her face was burning. Her father, the man who had disappeared when she was just a small child, the man her mother said had left them and never looked back, was now sitting at one of her tables in a quiet little diner, eating the food she had served him out of kindness. And he had no idea she was his daughter until she told him just moments ago. His face was pale now. He looked like he had seen a ghost. The fork had fallen from his hand and landed on the plate with a loud clatter, but he didn't even flinch. He just stared at her, completely frozen. Emily saw a mix of emotions in his eyes: shock, confusion, pain, and something else, too. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was fear. Whatever it was, it made her heart ache. "I'm sorry," she whispered. suddenly unsure if she had done the right thing by telling him so quickly. "I didn't mean to scare you." Daniel slowly blinked as if trying to wake up from a dream. "You said ... Emily?" he asked, his voice cracking. She nodded. "Emily Carter? I'm your daughter." He leaned back slowly, both hands on the table, trying to understand what he had just heard. "I can't believe this," he said softly. I thought I'd never see you again." Emily couldn't speak for a moment. Her throat felt tight and her eyes were wet, though she hadn't noticed the tears falling until one hit the table. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. "I thought you were gone," she said, her voice quiet. "I thought you were dead. Or that. You just ... didn't care." Daniel's eyes filled with tears too, and he quickly looked away, ashamed. "I never stopped caring," he said in a broken voice. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every single day." They sat there in silence, surrounded by the soft hum of the diner. Customers chatted, dishes clinked, and the coffee machine hissed behind the counter. But for Emily and Daniel, it felt like the world had disappeared. The diner was suddenly too loud and too quiet all at once. After a long pause, Daniel spoke. "Again, I don't even know where to begin. There's so much you don't know." "I want to know," she said. "But I don't understand. Why did you leave? Why didn't you come back?" He looked down at his hands, rough and weathered, as if trying to find the answers written in his skin. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said. "When I left, I thought I'd come back. I really did." He took a deep breath and began to tell her everything. Back then, Daniel had been in the military. He was proud to serve, but it was hard. Pressure, the long absences, and the things he saw during his time overseas began to change him. He came back from his final deployment. He wasn't the same. He had trouble sleeping. He had nightmares. Loud noises made him panic. He would wake up sweating and gasping for air, even when everything was quiet. He didn't know what it was at the time, but later, doctors would call it PTS, post-traumatic stress disorder. He tried to be strong for his family. For Emily, who was just a sweet little girl with curly hair and bright eyes. For her mother, Sarah, who had held everything together while he was away. But the truth was, Daniel was falling apart. He started drinking. At first, just a little, to help him sleep. Then more, to block out the memories. Then even more, because the pain wouldn't stop. "I didn't mean to become that kind of man," he said quietly. "I was angry all the time. I hated myself. I started arguments, scared your mother, and maybe even you. I don't blame her for telling me to leave." Emily was quiet. She remembered things now. Faint memories, her mother crying in the kitchen, loud voices. Behind closed doors, the sound of glass breaking once in the middle of the night. She had never known what those memories meant, till now. "I thought leaving would help," Daniel continued. "I thought if I gave your mom some space, I could fix myself and come back a better man. But I got worse. I lost my job. I lost my place to live. I tried to get help, but it was hard. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And then, years just went by." Emily listened without speaking. Every word hit her like a wave. She didn't know whether to feel angry or sad. She had spent her whole life thinking her father had chosen to walk away, that he simply didn't want her anymore. Was hearing a story filled with pain and regret? "I came back to Philly once," he said. "Years ago, I tried to find you. Even went to the old apartment, but you weren't there. I asked around, but nobody knew where you'd moved. And your mom ... she never wanted to see me again. Thought maybe it was for the best." "Why didn't you try again?" She asked, her voice trembling. "Because I didn't think I deserved it," he replied. "I didn't think I deserved you." His voice cracked at the end, and he looked away again. Emily felt something twist in her chest. She had spent so many birthdays wondering where her father was. She had watched other kids with their dads and wondered why hers wasn't there. She had cried herself to sleep more times than she could count. And now, the man who had haunted her memories was sitting right in front of her, broken and full of regret. "I carried this," Daniel said, reaching into the pocket of his old coat. He pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was worn, edges torn, stained from water and time. He placed it on the table and slid it toward her. Emily picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. It was a photograph. Her photograph. A little girl with curly brown hair, standing in front of a tree with a big smile on her face. She remembered that day. She had been 4. Her mom had taken the photo in the park. Emily's heart clenched. "You've had this all this time," she whispered. "Every single day," Daniel said. "It's the only thing that kept me going." Tears streamed down Emily's face now. She couldn't stop them, and she didn't try. Something inside her had cracked open. For so long, she had built a wall around her heart to protect herself from the pain of being abandoned. But now that wall was breaking, brick by brick. Daniel was crying too. Not loudly, but silently, tears slipping down his weathered face as he looked at the daughter he had lost and never stopped loving. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't even expect you to believe me. I just... I'm so sorry." Emily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. His hand was cold and rough, but she didn't pull away. "I don't know how to feel right now," she said honestly. "I'm hurt. I'm confused. I've spent my whole life wondering about you. But I can see you're not the man I imagined. You're not a monster. You're just human." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. "I don't have all the answers," she said, "but I think maybe we can talk more. Try to understand each other. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive everything yet, but I want to try." Daniel looked at her with wide, grateful eyes. "You want to try?" he asked softly. She nodded. A moment later, the bell above the diner door rang again as new customers entered. The world continued moving, but something inside both Emily and Daniel had changed. A door had opened between them, a door that had been shut for years. Later, after her shift ended, Emily sat with Daniel in the diner's back booth. They talked more, slowly, carefully. He told her about the places he had been, the shelters he had stayed in, small jobs he had picked up and lost. She listened. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she just nodded. Sometimes she cried. Quietly, the man she had once imagined as heartless and cold was actually fragile and wounded. The girl he had once left behind had grown into a kind, brave woman who still had space in her heart for hope. As the sun began to set and the rain finally stopped, Daniel stood up to leave. Emily packed him some extra food in a paper bag and handed it to him. He looked at her with a deep sadness and a quiet kind of joy. "Thank you," he said, "for the food, for listening, for not turning me away." She gave a small smile. "This isn't the end, okay?" He nodded. "I hope not." And then he walked out the door and disappeared into the evening light. Emily stood there, watching through the window. For the first time in her life, she knew where her father was, and deep down, something told her this was only the beginning. Emily couldn't sleep that night. After everything that had happened at the diner, her mind just wouldn't rest. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the man who walked into her life after so many years without even knowing. He was walking into his own daughter's world. The more she thought about it, the more questions she had. She wanted to understand everything, where he had been, what he had gone through, and how a father who once held her in his arms had ended up so lost and broken. The next morning, as soon as her shift ended, Emily went looking for him. She had given him a small amount of money and a warm meal the day before, but she hadn't asked him where he was going. Now she worried she might never see him again. She walked through the streets of Philadelphia, checking shelters, looking near old buildings, and asking a few kind strangers who might have seen him. After nearly 2 hours, she found him sitting on a bench in a quiet park near the river, feeding crumbs to some pigeons from the paper bag she had given him. He looked up when she approached, and a surprised smile crossed his tired face. He stood up slowly, his back slightly hunched, as if the years had weighed too heavily on him. "I didn't think I'd see you again so soon," he said gently. Emily gave him a small smile and sat beside him. "I have a lot I want to ask you," she said. He nodded slowly. "I think it's time I told you everything." They sat in silence for a few moments. The sound of the birds and the distant traffic filled the space between them. Then Daniel began to talk, and as he spoke, Emily's understanding of her past slowly began to change. He told her about his early days after leaving the family. He hadn't meant to disappear. After the fights with her mother, he thought it Would be best to leave for a short time, cool off, and come back when he had found help. But finding help wasn't easy. He had no family to turn to. His own parents had died years earlier, and he had no siblings. Friends who once supported him drifted away as his drinking worsened. He lost his job as a mechanic after showing up drunk too many times. And when the landlord kicked him out of his apartment, he had nowhere to go. He wandered from city to city for a while, trying to outrun the guilt that lived inside him. Sometimes he stayed in shelters, sometimes on park benches, sometimes under bridges. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into years. He tried to stop drinking many times, but it wasn't easy. The pain of knowing he had lost his daughter, that she was growing up without him, only made the drinking worse. "I always thought about you," Daniel said, his eyes distant as he stared at the water. "Every birthday, every holiday, I used to count how old you'd be, wonder if you were safe, if you were happy. But I thought your mom hated me. I thought you probably did too. I convinced myself I didn't deserve to see you again." Emily sat quietly, letting his words sink in. A part of her wanted to yell, to ask why he didn't fight harder, why he didn't send a letter, or try harder to find them. But another part of her could see how broken he had been, how lost. It was hard to understand, but it wasn't as simple as just leaving and not coming back. Life had swallowed him whole, and he had disappeared without even meaning to. "Did you ever get help?" she asked finally. Daniel nodded. "I did, eventually. A few years ago, I hit rock bottom. I was in a shelter in Baltimore, and I got sick, really sick. A volunteer there sat with me all night, thinking I might not make it. That scared me. The next day, I asked to join a recovery program. It took time, but I started getting sober. I've been clean for almost 2 years now. Still not easy, but better." Emily turned to look at him. His face was thin, his beard long, but his eyes were clear now, not cloudy with confusion like some of the other men she had seen on the streets. "I want to believe you," she said softly. "And I want to believe that people can change." He turned toward her. "You don't have to decide today. Just talking to you like this, it's already more than I ever dreamed of. I thought I'd go to my grave, never hearing your voice." Again, Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. For so long, she had carried this hole in her heart, wondering where her father had gone. Now that he was in front of her, she didn't know how to fill it, but she knew she wanted to try. "Do you have anywhere to stay?" she asked him. He shook his head. "Shelters mostly. Sometimes I sleep outside. Depends on how full they are." "Can't sleep on the streets anymore," she said firmly. "We need to find something better." Daniel smiled, touched by her concern. "You don't have to take care of me, Emily. I'm a grown man." "I'm not trying to take care of you," she replied. I want you to be okay." They spent the next hour walking together through the city. Emily helped him sign up for a spot in a local shelter that offered job training and support for veterans. She also talked to the program coordinator, who promised to help Daniel get back on his feet. He needed new clothes, a doctor's checkup, and someone to talk to, someone trained to help people who had seen too much pain. Emily promised she'd come check on him the next day. As they said goodbye outside the shelter, Daniel turned to her, his eyes full of emotion. "You're the kindest person I've ever met," he said, "and I can't believe you're my daughter." Emily looked up at him. "I don't know what will happen next," she said, "but I want to keep talking. I want to get to know you. And maybe someday we can build something again." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's all I want." That night, Emily sat at home with a box of old family photos. She pulled out the picture of her and her mother from years ago, and then the one of her father in uniform, the one she had stared at as a child, wondering where he had gone. Now she knew. The truth was harder than she imagined, but it was real. And real was better than silence. The following days were filled with new beginnings. Emily visited Daniel almost every day. Sometimes they sat in the park, drinking coffee from paper cups and talking about small things. Sometimes they sat in the shelter's common area, where she helped him fill out forms for job programs. She even helped him get a state ID card, something he hadn't had in years. As they spent more time together, Daniel opened up even more. He told her stories about his childhood, his dreams before the war, and how he used to imagine building a treehouse for her in the backyard. Emily listened with interest, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. Each conversation helped her understand him more. He asked about her too, about school, her friends, her dreams. She told him about her job at the diner, how she loved talking to customers, and how she was thinking about going back to school to study social work. She wanted to help people like him, people who had gotten lost, but still deserved a second chance. Daniel smiled when she said that. "You already helped me," he said. "You saved me." Their bond grew slowly, like a fragile plant taking root after a storm. There were still awkward moments, and sometimes Emily felt overwhelmed by the emotions. She never felt alone in it. For the first time in her life, she was getting to know her father, not the man from old photos or her painful memories, but the man who sat in front of her now, trying to make things right. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park again, Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out a small wooden figure. It was a carving of a bird, smooth and carefully shaped. "I made this for you," he said, handing it to her. Emily took it in her hands and ran her fingers over the wings. "You carved this?" He nodded, learned at the shelter. "Something to keep my hands busy. They say it helps with focus. I wanted to give you something that meant hope. Birds always fly forward. That's how I want to live now." Emily looked at him, tears stinging her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll keep it forever." By the end of the week, Daniel had a new haircut, a clean shave, and a fresh set of clothes. He looked like a different man, still tired, still scarred, but no longer invisible. Stood straighter, smiled more, and even laughed sometimes. Emily took a photo of them together on her phone. It was the first photo they had taken in over 19 years. She stared at it later that night, marveling at how strange and beautiful life could be. Her heart was still healing, and she knew there would be more hard days ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt since she was a little girl, hope. And hope, she realized, was the beginning of everything. The days after Emily reconnected with her father felt both heavy and light at the same time. Heavy because the truth of the past still lived in her heart, and light because something new was growing, something she had never expected to have again, a chance to know her father. Each day they spent together gave her a clearer picture of the man he had been, the man he had become, the man he was still trying to be. But it wasn't easy. In the beginning, things seemed almost too perfect. Daniel was doing everything right. He was attending his recovery meetings, showing up for job counseling at the shelter, and keeping in touch with Emily. He sent her short texts in the mornings, just simple messages like, "Have a good day," or "Thank you for yesterday." Sometimes they met at the diner after her shift ended and sat quietly drinking coffee, talking about little things like music or old movies. Emily was careful with her feelings, still unsure of how much to trust, but she was hopeful. Then one Thursday evening, things shifted. Emily had a long day at work and decided to call Daniel to check in, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She waited a few hours and tried again. Still nothing. A quiet panic began to grow inside her. She waited until the next morning and called the shelter where he had been staying. The staff told her Daniel hadn't returned the night before. Her chest tightened. Her thoughts began to race. What if he had relapsed? What if he had gone back to the streets? What if he had given up? She left work early and went looking for him. She checked the park bench, where they usually sat, the nearby soup kitchen, even the alleys behind the convenience store where many homeless people gathered. No sign of him. By evening, she felt helpless. Late that night, her phone finally rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she answered it immediately. Emily. The voice on the line was rough and low. "Dad?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm okay," he said. "I'm sorry. I just... I had a moment. I didn't mean to disappear. I should have called. I just needed some time to think. Where are you?" she asked quickly. He gave her the name of a small shelter across the city. She rushed there as soon as she could. When she found him, He looked different, tired in a way she hadn't seen since the day they met again. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled slightly. But he hadn't been drinking. He'd just been overwhelmed. "I almost gave up," he admitted, when she sat beside him. "I've been trying so hard to do the right thing, but some days it feels like I'll never be able to fix anything." Emily reached out and held his hand. "You don't have to fix everything in one day," she said. "It's okay to feel tired. But you can't run away every time you do." He nodded. "I'm not used to having someone who cares. What scares me? I'm here," she said. "But you have to promise me you won't disappear again." "I promise," he said. That moment made Emily realize how fragile this second chance really was. Daniel wasn't a perfect man trying to make a comeback. He was a broken man learning how to stand again. She wasn't just a daughter hoping to reconnect. She was a woman choosing to open her heart to someone who had once shattered it. From that point on, she started setting small boundaries, not to push him away, but to protect both of them. She encouraged him to stay committed to his meetings. She helped him apply for a program that offered temporary housing for veterans. He got a room of his own, a clean bed, and even a small writing desk. It wasn't fancy, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Emily began to look deeper into her own past. She realized she had always accepted her mother's version of the story without asking questions. Her mother had told her that Daniel had left them, that he had been unreliable, and that they were better off without him. But now, knowing Daniel's side, Emily began to wonder what her mother had gone through and why she had chosen silence instead of honesty. One Sunday afternoon, Emily visited her mother. They hadn't spoken much about Daniel since his return. Her mother still looked uncomfortable whenever his name came up. Emily sat at the kitchen table where she had eaten thousands of meals growing up and looked across at the woman who had raised her alone. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk about Dad?" Her mother froze for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I figured this would come eventually." Emily leaned forward. "Why didn't you tell me more about him? The truth?" Her mother sighed and looked out the window. "Because I was angry and hurt. And I didn't want you to grow up thinking he had any excuse for leaving. But he was sick," Emily said gently. "Had PTSD. He was struggling." "I know," her mother replied. "But back then, I didn't understand any of that. I just saw a man who had changed into someone I didn't recognize. He wasn't violent, but he was lost. He'd disappear for days. He'd sleep all day, drink all night. I had to protect you. So I asked him to leave. You didn't let him come back." Her mother nodded slowly. "He came once, about a year later. I told him we'd moved on. I was afraid he'd bring chaos back into your life." Emily felt tears form in her eyes. "I needed to know him. I needed the truth." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Maybe I made a mistake," she said. "But I did what I thought was right at the time. I was scared. I was alone. And I didn't know how to raise you and handle his pain too." Emily didn't know what to say. She had come looking for anger, but she found something else, another side of the story, full of its own kind of heartbreak. As she walked home that night, Emily realized something important. Everyone in her life had been hurting in their own way. Her father had been lost in his trauma. Her mother had been overwhelmed by fear and responsibility. And she, Emily, had grown up between those two broken pieces, trying to make sense of it all without knowing the full truth. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to change again. Daniel got a part-time job helping clean up a local community garden. It wasn't much, but it gave him purpose. He began to smile more, talk more, and stand a little taller. Emily visited him often, bringing meals, helping him fill out papers, and even teaching him how to use a phone properly again. One afternoon, he surprised her with something. He had joined a support group for veterans with estranged families. He stood up at a meeting and told their story, how a waitress gave food to a homeless man and how that man turned out to be her father. The group listened with teary eyes. That story, once filled with pain and confusion, was now giving hope to others. Later that evening, Daniel said something that stayed with her forever. "You gave me my life back, Emily," he said. "But more than that, You gave me a reason to live it." Emily didn't know how to respond, so she just hugged him. She held him tightly, like a daughter who had lost and found her father all in one lifetime. Life wasn't suddenly perfect. There were still hard days. There were awkward moments when he didn't know what to say. There were days when she still felt hurt about the years they had lost, but now they talked about it. They didn't hide it, and that made all the difference. They even began making plans together, simple ones, going to the movies, celebrating her next birthday together, and maybe even one day taking a short trip to the countryside. For Emily, these small dreams meant everything, because for the first time in her life, they felt possible, and somewhere deep inside, she knew that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about accepting it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward anyway. Daniel was not the same man who had left her so many years ago. He was older, sadder, wiser, and he was still learning how to be a father. And Emily was not the same little girl who had cried by the window waiting for someone who never came. She was a strong, kind woman who had chosen healing over hate, love over fear. And because of that, both of them were finding their way home one step, one conversation, and one moment of honesty at a time. The sunlight poured gently into the small diner as Emily wiped down the last table of her morning shift. It had been 6 months since that unbelievable day when a homeless man walked in, accepted a meal, and changed her life forever. 6 months. Since she had looked into his tired eyes and realized they belonged to the man she thought she had lost forever, her father. Since then, everything in her life had changed. Not suddenly, not magically, but piece by piece. Like stitching torn cloth slowly and carefully, Emily and her father, Daniel, had begun to mend what was once broken. Life still moved on as usual in the diner. The same regular customers still ordered their favorite meals. Carla still gave quick glances and raised eyebrows when things got too quiet or too loud. But for Emily, nothing about those normal days felt the same anymore. Her heart carried something it had never held before, kind of peaceful strength. Daniel had come a long way from the lost and weary man who first stepped through that diner door. With the help of the shelter program, the veteran support group, and most importantly, Emily's belief in him, he had found stability. He was now living in a shared housing facility for veterans. He had a small room with a real bed, a window that let the light in, and shelves lined with simple things books, a few carvings he had made by hand, and photos of his daughter. He had started working part-time at a community garden where he helped with planting, watering, and organizing neighborhood cleanup events. Though his job wasn't fancy, it gave him a sense of purpose. His hands, once shaky from years of pain and drinking, now grew things from the soil. Every seed he planted, he was also planting something deeper inside himself. Hope. Every Friday, Daniel came to the diner for lunch. He always sat at the same table by the window, wearing his simple gray jacket and a calm smile on his face. Emily would serve him his favorite meal, grilled cheese with tomato soup, and sit with him during her break. They would talk about the small things and sometimes the heavy things. He would ask her about her dreams, and she would tell him about her plan to go back to school. She had decided to study social work, inspired by the stories she had heard. At the shelter and the journey of her father, one Friday afternoon, a woman with a camera and notepad walked into the diner. She introduced herself as a journalist from a local newspaper. She had heard about Emily's story through a volunteer from the veterans group and wanted to write an article. Emily was surprised at first, unsure if she wanted something so personal to be shared. But Daniel gave her a quiet nod. "People need to hear stories like this," he said. "It might give someone else the strength to reconnect to." Emily agreed. She sat with the reporter for over an hour, telling her everything from the moment Daniel walked in to the moment she called him Dad again, without hesitation. She cried a little during the interview, and so did the reporter. A few weeks later, the story was published under the title, "The Waitress and the Stranger, a Meal That Rebuilt a Family." The article touched thousands of readers. People from all over the country wrote letters and emails to the diner. Some shared their own experiences with lost family members. Others said the story made them call someone they hadn't spoken to. in years. A few even came to the diner just to meet Emily and shake her hand. One day, while Emily was serving a table, an older man approached her and introduced himself as the head of a nonprofit organization that helped homeless veterans reconnect with their families. He'd read the article and was moved by her kindness and strength. He offered her the chance to work part-time with their team, helping others who were in the same place Daniel had once been. Emily felt nervous about stepping outside her comfort zone. She had always worked in the diner, but something inside her said it was time to grow, so she accepted. Working with the organization was both emotional and inspiring. She met people who were lost, afraid, and ashamed, just like Daniel had been. Some had not spoken to their children in decades. Some thought it was too late. But when they heard Emily's story, they started to believe that maybe they too could find their way back. She helped write letters for those who couldn't find the right words. She sat with people who had given up, helping them feel seen again. And each time someone made progress, she thought of her father and the long road he had walked. Daniel, meanwhile, continued his own healing. He had stopped counting the days of sobriety and started focusing on living one day at a time. He still went to therapy, still attended meetings. But now, he also gave talks at shelters and events, sharing his journey and reminding people that no one was too far gone to be found. One evening, Daniel was invited to speak at a city event honoring veterans who had overcome homelessness. Emily went with him. She sat in the front row, holding a small tissue in her hand, just in case the tears came. When Daniel walked on stage, he looked calm and proud. He spoke slowly from the heart. "I lost everything once," he began. "I lost my home, my health, my hope. But what hurt most was losing my daughter. I thought I had no way back. I thought I had burned every bridge. And one day I walked into a diner just looking for a meal, ... And I found a miracle." The room was silent except for the soft sounds of people quietly crying. Daniel continued, "That waitress didn't see a homeless man. She saw a human being. And when she found out who I really was, she didn't run. She didn't scream. Sat with me. She listened. She gave me a second chance. And because of her, I found the strength to change." He looked down at Emily with eyes full of gratitude. "She didn't just give me food. She gave me my life back." The audience stood up and applauded. Emily stood too, clapping through her tears. She had never felt so proud. After the event, a local TV station aired a short video about Daniel's journey. The clip went viral. Strangers from other cities began to donate to the shelter program. Other fathers and daughters began writing letters to each other, taking their first brave steps toward forgiveness. Emily started receiving invitations to speak at schools, churches, and community centers. She always said the same thing: kindness can change everything. It doesn't take much to change a life. Sometimes all it takes is one meal, one conversation, one moment of compassion. Life, of course, wasn't perfect. Daniel still had days when the weight of the past came crashing down. There were nights when Emily would get a call just to hear him say, "I'm struggling today." But now, they faced those struggles together. They had built a bond, not from perfect memories, but from honest ones. And that made it even stronger. One morning, Emily woke up to find a small package at her doorstep. Inside was a wooden box, carefully carved. She opened it and found a note. "Dear Emily, I made this for you. It's not much, but it's my way of saying thank you for believing in me, for giving me a second chance. I know I can never give you back the years we lost, but I promise, for the years we have left, I'll be here. Love, Dad." Inside the box was a beautiful wooden necklace with a small carved heart. Emily held it in her hand for a long time. Then she put it around her neck and smiled, not because everything had been fixed, no, but because something rare and beautiful had been found: peace. That weekend, father and daughter went on their first short trip together. They took a bus to a nearby town, walked through a farmer's market, had lunch by a lake, and laughed more than they had in a long time. Emily took a photo of them sitting side by side on a bench, both smiling at the camera, sunlight dancing on their faces. Later that night, she posted the photo online with a simple caption, 6 months ago, he was a stranger. Today, he's my dad again. Don't ever give up on someone who's trying to come home. That post was shared thousands of times. People didn't just see a story, they saw hope. They saw proof that sometimes life gives you a second chance. Not wrapped in perfection, but in truth, courage, kindness. And for Emily and Daniel, that second chance was more than enough. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they knew they would face it together, and together they would. Keep choosing love again and again, because sometimes one small act of kindness really can change everything.